Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Hey everybody, how's it going? I am 15 minutes late. Hello. Shoo. I don't know what that means. Jenny. All right, you guys. I apologize. I got reminded that I forgot again. Ugh. I don't know. I'm going to set a darn alarm on my phone. I am so checked out at night and done for the day. Um, hey, yes, I have had a good week. Thank you very much. Torgeson Farms. What is your first name? You're here every week and I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Hey, Shane. Hey, Brooklyn. Hey, Dalton. Okay, guys, keep the comments coming. I am going to get into it because I'm late and I apologize. And I'm glad that I remembered. Well, I'm glad that I got reminded. I got a reminder text. Where are you? So I'm glad I got a reminder text because I did not sleep good last week, missing our meeting on Thursday nights. I tell you guys to show up and then I don't show up. You know what it's kind of like? My daughter's schooling and online. The teachers don't show up, but the kids are supposed to show up. Okay, let's get started. Hey, Reggie. Okay, now I asked your first name and I can't even pronounce it. Enrique? Enrique? Oh, I think I got it. Hey, Marilyn. Okay, so let's get started. First client that I am going to go over this week was not in the farming industry, is actually in the tech industry. And he has a very stressful job, so he thinks he's going to get into farming and start farming. So we had a really nice discussion about maybe starting small, doing some greenhouse stuff, maybe just doing small acreage, even doing plants and pots for certain things because he just doesn't have any experience in farming. He likes that industry and he had a lot of debt. And so we just didn't have any money to get started either. But we also have to remember that not everybody who likes the farming industry has to farm, right? So we can still help our farmers and we can still be involved in that industry. And so there was a lot of tech stuff that he does that I was like, I'm sure there is a need for that in the farming industry, and it's just finding his niche. So that call ended up being way more business consultant, way more encouraging, as we didn't have anything to do with finance. But that's okay. I end up doing a lot of those type of calls as well. And those are fun to me because I do like to be able to help people and motivate them and give them ideas because guess what? We're not all married to a spouse that we can bounce those ideas off of, which leads me into the second one. So the first guy was the same thing. He didn't have a spouse. She didn't understand farming. She thinks it's too much risk. Why would you want to do that? That's silly. I had another client exactly the same way this week. His spouse understands that industry, but he's into greenhouses and hemp, and they're just kind of getting started. And things just aren't, they're getting started. They're learning. Of course, the first year probably isn't going to be profitable. And so the wife's income is having to supplement some of that. And she's getting frustrated, rightfully so. They are keeping track, though, of how much they owe her. And I said, and interest, right? You need to pay her plus interest. Her money is not free. Make sure that you keep that. And then they have just, it's pretty crazy how expensive greenhouses are. And so they have a lot of debt in their greenhouse, or just for starting everything up. And just the payments are huge because the bank only will go like 5 years on a greenhouse, which I think is a little bit crazy personally, because they should last more than 5 years, and on a building they go more than 5 years. But hey, I don't know anything about greenhouses. So they go 5 years, so the payment is astronomical. And these particular clients also have an investor. And so the investor has some money in it. They have to, they created an LLC. So they have aquaponics and they have some greenhouses going. They're doing a bunch of cool stuff. And there's two separate LLCs. And so they're not going to be able to make this payment for this greenhouse. So they're going to have to pull from savings, which they have a lot of savings and a lot of money in 401ks. So they're going to have to pull from savings or the 401k in order to make the payment. Or the other option was, can you take the money from savings and pay off your portion of this greenhouse loan? So now you can pay it back to yourself over 10 years. And I think we're going to save $60,000 of cash flow. So that's huge, 60 grand. So the wife, though, was a little bit concerned that we're going to drain their savings. I said, okay, so if we drain your savings, you still have 401k to fall back on should you need to. If we don't drain it all at once, we're going to drain it over time. Because if you can't make the $85,000 payment, who's going to make it, right? If the LLC can't make it, who's going to make it? You're going to make it, and you're just going to take it out of savings slower. Here, you can just take it out and then pay it back to yourself, or miss a payment to yourself, or until the greenhouse gets going. And now they do have them up for sale because they ended up having to move and they're not in the same location. And so it's kind of turned into a little bit of a hassle. So I get that. And so, but we have to remember it's one pool of money. It does not matter if we pay it all off at once, if we pay it all off over time. If we just use it to make payments, yes, we have more liquid money if we need it. But if we don't have that liquid money at some time and we still need it, we're going to have to sell the greenhouses or not pay. Either way, we ended up at the same result, nothing, right? It's just how fast do we want to get to nothing. So it is, it was interesting. Hey, Steve, I don't know if it was too big too soon. Because they're learning about it. And so I think probably just more upfront money maybe could have been applied to it so that the payments weren't so big. But I don't know that they were, I guess I didn't ask the size, so I can't say. But like the first guy I was visiting with you about, if we don't have a spouse that's on board, it is really, really hard to get to that next step. And I don't care if you're farming or if you're just in general business, it's really hard to keep motivated if somebody's going to keep pulling you down. And then you get up a little bit and then somebody keeps pulling you down. And it's just the negativity of it. It's the not understanding it. It's the not wanting to take risk, which I get. But if we can free up 60 grand, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And it makes everybody's life just a little bit easier. Noah, I know farming is stressful, right? And so he thought for him, it might not be if we get in slowly. But yeah, we don't just jump in and then hope that it's not going to be stressful. Um, Automated milkers and several combines. Your first guy could help there with programming and tech. Nice. I never thought about that, Derek. That's awesome. Hey, Brian. Okay. Next guy. This was awesome. He came out of the field to meet with me. And so, all of you who think, oh, I am too busy, I can't stop and meet with Mary Jo, we make time for what is important. Okay, this guy has an off the farm job and he's farming. He could have very easily said, you know what, nope, not happening. But he made the time. We buzzed through the meeting. It wasn't even an hour and a half. Typically, my meetings are an hour and a half. If I know you have someplace to go, we get right to it and we are on our way, right? So there is not a lot of BS time, which is fine with me. I like to get to know people, but when you have things to do, we don't have time for BS sessions. So we got right to it for him. He is renting mom stuff, doesn't know if he's going to get it, totally okay with that. He's got his off the farm job. He doesn't think that it's any of his business what happens. That you don't come across often either. I really liked that attitude. Like, you know what? It doesn't mean I deserve it. I'm renting it, I'm farming it, whatever I get, I get. And he has bought a couple other pieces, and he's a Dave Ramsey fan. So he didn't hardly have any debt at all because a lot of that has been paid off. But he did go and buy a couple pieces that he now can have on his own, which is also good because his kid wants to start farming, and so he's going to have that for his kids without having to wait for moms because dad passed away already. Um, he though too was putting, I think he was putting like 16 13% or 16% of all of his money from off the farm. He has a really good off the farm job. And he's putting all this money into his 401k. So what does he do then? Goes to the bank and borrows the money to buy the land, when he really wouldn't have needed to borrow all the money to buy the land because it's all sitting in his 401k. And so he wants to have that liquid money. So don't necessarily stop contributing to your 401k, maybe just contribute less. And that's what his thought was, is I'm just going to contribute less and then I'm going to put the rest of it into a life insurance policy to start creating that pool of money. But I may not love all of what Dave Ramsey has to say, but I do love the fact that he gets you guys to a point where you are managing your money and you're not overspending. Living within your means, however you want to say it. I think that's negative thought process. Oh, let's just live within our means, not say, how can I afford whatever? What else can we do? I'm always wanting to know, how can I make it better, or what other things can I do? But if we still have to have that budget. I am not the kind of person that can help you budget because I'm pretty frugal anyway. So to me, it's just human nature. It's just common sense. So if you need a budget, by all means, go to Dave Ramsey. But you guys have heard me talk about the Dave Ramsey clients that I've had before. What they don't have is cash flow or liquid money because Dave says pay cash for everything. And so cash is gone when we need it. The next ones, thanks, Steve. The next one's the whole family. This was awesome. I like it when the whole family's on board. So mom, dad, both brothers, sister, and there is one sister that does not work on the farm, not coming back to the farm. She was not in the meeting. So 5 of them in the meeting. And before you guys meet with me, I send you an email that says, hey, these are all the numbers I'm going to need. This guy sent me a Word document with everything printed out. I love it. What should have taken probably a 2-hour meeting with that many people, we were able to do it in an hour and a half because he had everything laid out, which was fantastic. And so the two brothers and the dad are all partners. And the big question there was, so there's a couple things. They're dairy and they're making money in the dairy industry. And I said, what are you doing to make money? Like, there's just not a lot of people in the dairy industry making money. And he said, well, we've changed a lot of things in the last year. And they've changed some of their feed rations. They've looked at their numbers. And I said, so basically, you paid attention to the operation. Yep. So the one that came back to the farm about 2 years ago, there's one brother that's been on the farm forever, and then the other one came back about 2 years ago. He's the numbers guy. He's the guy that likes to do the spreadsheets. He's the one that did the Word document. He is paying attention to the numbers. So he knows, they know now what was making money, what wasn't making money. They're producing more milk. They want to eventually add some robots in there, which I've had other clients with robots that they're producing more milk because the cows are just going in to eat more. And so, and more free, or to milk more and more frequently. And so that is cool that they have basically turned their operation from not profitable to profitable in a year or two because they have paid attention to the numbers. The other awesome thing that we talked about is they are buying, they don't really have any liquid cash because anything that comes to them, they roll back in. Comes to them, roll back in. And so I said, what have you bought in the last year with cash? How much are you spending every single year that you're buying things? Building, maybe they're improving buildings or they're buying pieces of equipment or whatever. And they said, well, in the last couple, like last year, we spent 150,000 in cash to buy things and improve on things. Okay, great, fantastic. But they said that's probably not going to keep going. We're not going to keep spending at that level. Okay, if we keep making at that level and not spending at that level, we could have still easily done like $100,000 a year, right? But let's just back it off, maybe do $40,000 a year because we're going to start safe and then we're going to work our way up into it. We don't know if this is going to keep up. They want to expand, all these other things. I mean, they have it all set out, projections for the next year or two, which is absolutely fantastic because they are running their business that is very different than working in it, right? So if you can have and recognize that one of your family members does a really, really good job working the business itself and is okay with the numbers and you can trust them with those numbers, you might have to give up some control, but to trust them to know that those decisions are going to be okay and to come to the table and talk about it. Obviously, this family is coming to the table and talking about those business decisions. What wasn't being talked about necessarily is the transition of this dairy. And so what is dad going to do? And I was able to ask mom and dad those hard questions and they didn't have to answer it. So typically when we're in a setting like that, I'm going to ask, what is the transition plan? That doesn't mean that you have to answer that question. Okay, one sec. I ran down here so quickly that I didn't I didn't bring any water with me. So I need to beckon somebody that is on a different level of my house to bring me water. Because guess what? They are not watching my live. Okay, so we asked dad, what is that transition look like? And he said, I don't have anything else to do. And he's 62, if I remember correctly. And he said, I don't have anything else to do. And I said, there's a few things that I've learned from the farm mediators that I have talked to over the years. And that is that when dad retires or dad steps down, he loses his identity because his identity is in the farm. And so, how do we take over when he doesn't have any hobbies? His hobby is working, right? So now what do we do? And so he said, no, I don't have any hobbies. And I said, well, would it be bad to be a mentor? You need to mentor them. They're not even 40 years old yet. Can you mentor them so that there's still many, many things that they can learn? There's still advice that you can give them. It doesn't mean that they're going to completely take your advice, but there is advice that you can give them. Can you transition some of those financials to them so that you don't have the financial stress? But that doesn't mean that they're not going to ever ask you anything. That doesn't mean that they're not going to need you to help on the farm. You're still going to be able to work if that's what you like to do. But now we can transition over some of those responsibilities, and you're not just pushed to the side and somebody's saying to you, well, we don't need you anymore, because that's not what the intent of any child is to say, good riddance, we don't need you. No, they still do. It's just, how are you going to transition them? Thank you. And when we got all done, Dad said, that's really good. I've not thought of that. That there's a lot of things there to think about, of ways that we could do some transitioning. You know, there's always typically one in the family that just likes to work nonstop, and one that likes to maybe take some time off in the winter. And maybe it's mom, maybe it's dad, whatever that is. But if you're farming, you need to find a hobby or something that your whole entire identity is not just wrapped up in that farm. Because that's not just who you are. And we think that if we don't farm, that's not us, right? And I had another guy I talked to about this week. If we rent it out, that we're not farmers. What does it matter? If we're renting that ground out and making more money renting it out than farming it, that just means we're a good business person. That doesn't mean that we're not farmers anymore. And so you don't have to be busy to make money. And you don't have to be busy to have an identity. Find something else maybe that you have wanted to do that you have not ever done because you've never had time to do it. So very good meeting, went over financials, and did a little bit of, I don't want to even call it mediation, because the kids there was no fighting. It's just that the kids actually laughed and said, we can't wait to hear this answer. And mom and dad didn't have to answer. But dad was super, super awesome about opening up and talking about it. All right. I had another dairy guy that was in business with his family, and he was 63. Not a whole lot of the dairy pays for a lot of his, his house and his vehicles and his insurance and all that stuff, because it was another corporation. Not a ton of liquid money. He has a universal life policy that I could have very easily said, oh, that's crap, let's get rid of it. But I don't know if it's crap. So I have to look at the in-force illustration, see what's going on there, and then maybe he's going to have some money to start. What was super cool about him is that his kids were making fun of him because he was on a Zoom meeting and he can barely use his phone. So he read the book. He said it's the first book he's ever read, or it's the second book he's ever read cover to cover, which has led him to reading more books. And he accidentally was listening to podcasts and hit something on his phone, and there my podcast was. And so he is listening to all my podcasts. He is really, really educating himself. And that is very cool as well, because if you think, well, I never read, au contraire, you know how many people I talk to that say, I have never read a book, I don't read, that have read my book and that continue to read. Because as soon as you find something interesting to read about, you're going to keep reading. I also really like this guy because he complimented me on my laugh and said that is a favorite part of his podcast. Now, I cannot say everybody compliments me on my laugh. Most people will say, you are so loud, I can hear you across the room. So he will be my new friend, because I really liked that guy. All right, before I go on to the next guy, let's see. Dairy needs a pivot into beef. DoorDash order. Yes, I got my water, so now I can talk again. Okay. This guy, this was a husband and wife, and this, I am not gonna lie, was a brain buster for me. This particular client had to leave the family farm operations split. And so not only did he is on his own and buying his own land now, but any equipment that he owned a third of that he is buying, he also has to buy out the other thirds. And so even though he's doing okay and he's able to make all of his payments, he had 16 loans. Now, typically I see a lot of loans. 16 loans is a lot of loans. And he had, of those 16 loans, I am going to look here, because I really think that this particular case is a lot like what most people's situation is. And so he had 16 loans, of which 3 of them, I believe it's 3 or 4 of them. One of them was a $21,000 payment a year, a $30,000 payment a year, a $38,000 payment a year, and a $25,000 payment a year. He is not farming enough acreage to justify the size of equipment in these loans. And I said, why do you have such big equipment for that small of acreage? Well, because he's having to pay his third and the third of whichever sibling or family member he bought out. He is upside down on that equipment. And so he can't sell it. Well, he could, but he would take a loss on it. And so he's trying to make it work. And so I ran a ton of strategies, but he too has money in investments. And he's got a lot of equity in his home. And so the only true strategy here to get him to be able to make these payments in a year and to be able to give him some room was to say, okay, if we refinanced your house and we took the money out of the house and paid off one of these loans or 2 of these loans and took some of that investment money And so, because he doesn't like that investment money. Now, he asked me to do this. This is not something that I'm always advising, even though I have a lot of people doing it. They're thinking of this stuff before they come to me. So don't, people that are out there thinking I'm an idiot, this is not something that I can advise on. And so if he did that, we were going to free up $84,000 a year in payments. Now, it's equipment that he's not going to trade off. So he can continue to pay back, or he can continue to pay himself back on this equipment, because we don't just take $84,000 out of the house and don't pay that back. We don't just take $84,000 out of savings or an investment or a CD or whatever and don't pay that back. We still have to pay it back. It was money you used from yourself. It's not free. The payment still has to be made. And so now that money, that payment back to himself, can go back into a life insurance policy. And that is going to be awesome. Can he get started right this second? Nope, absolutely not, because we need him to pay off debt. Very much like the first person I started to talk about today, we're going to need some time for all that to get sorted out, get some debt paid off, figure out what that looks like, and get that refi done, and then be able to start the policy. So not something that we are going to be able to start right away. But so don't think that, oh, I can't have any debt when I go talk to Mary Jo. I need to have everything paid off. I don't know what dream you're having, but everybody's got something. It's either a mortgage or it's a couple pieces of land or whatever. We can still do something. This was huge. This was absolutely huge. And last week I went over a situation that was very similar to this. And sometimes my brain has to work a little bit harder than others, because in this situation, I am trying to pick to see what scenario is going to work the best. The first, because I have two of them that I ran. The first scenario I ran only freed up $74,000 because I didn't pick the right things to pay off with the highest cash flow that's going out, right? With the highest payments. And so I had to kind of juggle those numbers around and figure out which one was going to be the best. And so if you have a lot of debt and you have some money sitting there, which one is going to be the best? Even the gentleman that I had today, or whatever this week, with a lot of debt, which one do I pay off first? And he's overpaying on all his debts, when in fact he could overpay on the smallest one and then pay that one off and use that money to pay the next one and the next one and the next one. And that is just the snowball debt snowball effect, or whatever they call it. And that works really well to get all of those things paid off in a very timely manner. Okay. Then I had another potato farmer, and so I learned more about potatoes today. I don't know why anybody grows potatoes. The control is crazy. Those of you out there thinking that farming is hard, I am telling you, the hardest farming that I talk to anybody about is vegetables. It's unbelievable how the buyers control them. It's crazy to me. It's absolutely crazy. They have no control at all. I don't know why anybody would buy them. This particular individual, they had just wrapped all their debt up, did a debt consolidation, and they're saving $62,000 a year in payments. Where do you think that's going to go? If you were always making that payment and you were able to make it, well, we should keep making it to ourselves. And all of it, I don't know what that looks like, but no, maybe want to leave you a little bit of room. I might not take all 62 to put in a policy, but if you read Nelson's book, you're going to be honest. And if you were making a payment and you finished that payment, why are you not using that payment to start a policy? They two have, they just have a couple other debts, but she has a debt of, so they have a debt of 120,000 at 3.83%. And so she was going to, they're going to sell some land, and she was going to take money to pay off that $120,000 debt. Should we pay that off? It's 3.83. The loan on the policy is 4.76. Yes, she would have control of that. And if she wanted to pay it off, great, pay it off so that you have control, and it's you get to control the cash flow and the payments going out. But you already have the loan for that. And so if you're wanting to buy more cows, if you're wanting to, maybe they need operating for potatoes, maybe they need operating for soybeans or wheat or whatever they're growing. And so if you are more likely to get a no on that stuff, would you want to pay that 120,000 off, or do we want to leave that liquid to use it? And if we don't need it, then great, we can use it to make the payment, or we can pay it off. But don't be so quick to say I'm selling land and I'm going to just throw all this liquid money there. And so she said, I'm going to have all this money. Can I stick it all in at once? No, you cannot do a one-time premium, because that's going to mech the policy and it's all going to grow taxable. So we can't do that, but we can put it in over time. So I actually took her money, and because we have a significant cash flow on the other side, I'm like, okay, well, she was thinking, let's do $100,000 a year. Well, great. I can get 250 in year one, and then every year after is 100,000. So we could do that, and we could get the money in a couple of, 3-4 years or something like that, 4 or 5 years. We could get that money in, and then we can drop that premium down to maybe 50,000 or 40,000 or whatever the minimum is. So your premium is flexible. We have a max that we can put in, and year one, we can always put more in. We can boost it, or not always, but most of the time we can boost it depending on how we structure it. Again, it's important to have somebody that understands that. There are not a lot of companies that allow you to put that much more in year one. And then we structure it correctly, and then we can pay, we could pay 250 year one, and then we could pay 100, and then maybe we could drop it down to 50, depending on what the numbers look like and how that all looks according to how it's structured. Moral of the story, gives you an idea that we can throw some of that in if we have a land sale, okay? I had somebody else this week that wanted to put a bunch of that money in, and I said, you know what? I can't do that. I can't put it into the policy and borrow against the policy to pay off these other debts, because I'm not, you need every single dollar you have, and I'm only going to give you access to 75% of it. So we need to, I would rather you use the cash and then just pay yourself back for the cash and use that to start a policy. So I kind of use, if you guys are following me every week, you see I'm using sort of the same strategies all the time. The difference is how we're structuring that policy per case. How old are you? Can we structure it in such a manner that we can do what I did with this person that has this land sale, and we can get it all in right away? Is that going to work? I don't know. I still don't know what her health looks like. So we have to take all of those things into consideration, which is super important when you have an agent that you're working with, that they know what those options are with the life insurance company. Hey, Brian. This year is horrible for veggie farmers. I don't know that there's ever a good year for veggie farmers. Man, I just feel horrible for those guys. Okay, outside, that was pretty much my week. I still have some meetings tomorrow that had to get rescheduled due to some other stuff. So I didn't have quite as many meetings Monday through Thursday as I would normally have. But let me think, since I was not prepared and I was sitting on the couch, let me think who else I talked to this week. I have somebody that needs a personal loan. And I was like, you know what? I have a client that is sitting on a bunch of money and she might want to do a personal loan for something non-farm related. And I called her. And so it's amazing when you have liquidity, what that will do. The other thing that I found interesting this week is, and it feels like it's been 2 weeks, but we have put an offer in on some new property for ourselves. And I have had liquid money. I have had, my policies were full of money. I have had money in savings, and I have just been leaving that liquid waiting for an opportunity to be buying some property. Well, that property came available, and it is utterly amazing to me how different, and I know that this happens, but it was still pretty amazing how different the bank looks at you when you have money and you have liquid money, and how much easier it is to do business with them when you need a little more. But I think what's important there is they like cash flow, right? That was their main concern. Where is the cash flow coming to pay for this? They like to see that you've got some liquidity because that means you're managing your money. I also have to give my firstborn child and 5 pints of blood, just like everybody else. It has reminded me how much I hate filling out paperwork and justifying myself, which then brings me back to every single farmer, right? You have every year, you have to do your operating note, or you have to buy a piece of equipment, or you buy cows or whatever, and you get mad at them. But how soon we become complacent and forget about that. Now, because I haven't bought anything in a while, I forgot about how painful that process was. And I'm going to try very hard to remember that I don't want to have to do that again. Next time, I am just going to have enough money to do what I need to do, which means I personally have to beat Parkinson's law, right? If you don't know what Parkinson's law is, you should probably pick up Nelson's book and then read the chapter on Parkinson's law, or listen to my podcast about the chapter on Parkinson's law. Because I could have had more money in the policy over the several years we've been saving, but nope. And I've used that money in the meantime, though. We were saving, I used it for other things and I paid it back. Used it for a remodel, paid it back, right? And so it's been there for those things that we've done along the way. Now it's there again to buy more property. There was also another lesson in there. I forget what it was. One of the clients that I had this week had over $100,000 in cash value already in existing whole life policies with other companies, which was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Not the best companies in the world, not mutual, but who cares? It was whole life. It wasn't universal. It wasn't variable. It wasn't indexed. You know what? Hold on. And he said to me, yeah, I think I did that wrong. I borrowed that and it was 7.5%. And then we didn't pay it back right away. So I think I did that wrong. No, you didn't do that wrong. You borrowed it. You can pay it back whenever you want. I said, that's totally up to you. And if it's a 7% loan, granted, all your other loans are 4.5, 5.25. Would you rather have a 7.5% loan that you control over a 5.5% loan that you don't control? I don't care if interest rates were 25% at the bank and the life insurance company charged me 20%. I would much rather have a 20% loan that I control payback terms of than them. And I said, when you take a loan, the insurance company is not going to ask you what you're taking it for. They're not going to ask you what you use it for. They're not going to ask you when you pay it back. I'm not going to ask you because they're not even going to notify me. And he said, that was amazing to me. They did not care when I paid it back. He said, that was almost worth the 7.25 alone. That freedom of not having to ask those questions. The amount of time I have spent on the phone with the bank this week in between meetings is astronomical. It is stressful, it is annoying, I have better things to do. But the amount of questions they have, the amount of things that you have to do to get a loan, it is ridiculous. And so that alone, having access to cash, having access to liquidity is huge. I also had a client this week that they're 50 years old, 50, 2 universal life policies. They're both out of money already. Both of them are collapsing. They have had them for 30 years and they're both collapsing. The agent who sold them the policies is still selling life insurance. And he said, yeah, those didn't work out so good. Those were bad policies. There is a line for me about when an agent should know better. And if he knew that 5-10 years ago, why did he not come to them and say, hey, we can 1035 this into whole life? And what that means is any cash value they had then would have been rolled over into a new policy. Now they've lost it. Her policy is collapsing and his only has about maybe $2,000 in it. She thought maybe it was even less than that. 50. I don't typically see that till 65, 70. And they were 50. And the company they're with has good whole life policies. There should be no excuse for that. None, 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 except an agent that does not look down the guaranteed column and say, oh yeah, it's going to be here guaranteed. Instead, we look down the 12%. Oh, we're going to make 12% because 30 years ago, that was the big thing, right? The market was doing great. So let's just undersell a policy and the market's going to make up for the rest. Makes me mad. So if you've got life insurance, make sure it is whole life. Another policy I saw this week was an adjustable whole life. Well, that's interesting because at adjustable whole life, the death benefit goes down every single year. I have not ever seen a policy like that. I have to investigate that policy, but a policy that goes down every year and it's whole life. If this is like the last one I saw, this is the second time they use the word whole. So they're calling it a whole life, but an adjustable whole life or a flexible whole life, they're still tied to the market. This policy was an adjustable whole life, still tied to the market. So not really a whole life. It has a mutual fund that seems to be funding the policy. No. A whole life has nothing, a true whole life policy has nothing to do with the stock market. So go to your file cabinet, pull out your policy and look at what it says. It should say whole life. That's it, that simple. If it's a true whole life policy, that's what it should say. If it doesn't, and it says universal, variable, adjustable, flexible, premium paying, indexed, if it has any of those words, it is most likely tied to the market, and that thing is not guaranteed. So are we going to have the money, or are we going to be 50 and it collapses on us? And we say, oh, well, I sold you something that wasn't very good. Okay, not, oh, well, I wouldn't be sleeping good at night if I was saying that to my clients, because that's not okay, in my opinion. If we're going to sell life insurance, we have to be educated in it to understand it. People say, well, Mary Jo, why don't you sell accidental insurance? Why don't you sell long-term care, why don't you sell blah, 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 blah. Because I do one thing and I do it well. I teach the infinite banking concept in conjunction with using whole life, and I do that well. The fact that look at you guys, I've been doing this for 11 years. I have never seen that policy that I saw this week. So now I have to go back and investigate that. I spend so much time just learning about life insurance. How am I supposed to be an expert at everything? I can't. I'll find an expert and send you to the expert on those other things because I can't be all of it. And I don't want to give misinformation. So surround yourself. Okay. Oh, the other thing that I think I was going to say that I did not say is to keep in mind, I've been doing this. I've had a policy now for 12 years. And I still have to go to the bank to borrow money. Don't think that this is going to happen overnight because it doesn't. It is a process of getting away from that banking system. So give yourself a little bit of grace and work your way into it. As much as I today would love to just have paid cash for this, I could not do it. And I just have to ask the bank for money. And it's okay because I'm still getting a better rate there than I would with the life insurance company. And it still allows me to have liquid money to do some other things. However, so many people think that they just want to have it overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. Even the bankers laugh at me because they ask what I do, and I tell them what I do. And they said, oh, but here you are. I'm like, I am here. So see, I'm not the bad guy. I do tell people to go to the bank and borrow money if it's cheaper, if we can, if that's our avenue, whatever. I'm not completely taking your clients. So that's been kind of fun this week to have those conversations. I actually, the one banker that we're working with said, I know you. I'm like, you do? I don't know you. And she said, I know you. You wrote that book, Farming Without the Bank. So that was pretty cool. I'm like the local celebrity for one person. One person. But it was still fun. Okay. I don't think that I have anything else. If you have not gotten the book, go to farmingwithoutthebank.com, grab the book there, grab the Farming Without the Bank book. I don't have it on my desk. Grab Nelson's book, which is always on my desk. Grab Nelson's book. I have my books in audio. Listen to the podcast. You can go to YouTube to see last week's podcast, which actually has some numbers in it. And I have my calculators on there. Otherwise, comments, concerns, email me at maryjo@withoutthebank or message me here. Here's the thing, you guys. If you have listened to the book and you want to have a meeting, okay? I have a couple people that are like, oh, I'll just call you sometime. You can't just call me sometime. I wish that you could, but it's an hour-and-a-half meeting. I am booked out I haven't looked, but I think I'm booked out till the middle of October-ish. So get on the schedule now. You have time to read the book. Yes, you might have to come out of the field for an hour-and-a-half. Okay, how important is this to you? Same thing like the guy that I had earlier this week. He came out of the field to talk to me. He made it an importance. So we do an hour-and-a-half Zoom meeting. You do not need to live in my town. You do not need to come to me. It is all over the internet. If my guy that thinks my laugh is awesome, remember my new buddy? If that guy can figure out how to get on Zoom, and yes, he did have somebody helping him, but he asked for help. He made it happen. How bad do you want it to happen? If you have purchased the book from me, look at your emails. There is a link in there to schedule. I am getting a lot of messages that say, hey, I'm ready to have an appointment. That link is in your emails. I'm happy to send it to you. But if you're reading your email or if it's in spam, check your spam folder. A lot of the emails go to spam. But you have a link to my calendar, and so you can schedule on there. People are canceling. I had like 3 cancellations for the next month over in this last week. So you can be checking on there too to see if there's a cancellation that you can get in sooner. Check once a day or whatever. But those times normally do fill up. If you want to get on our waiting list, please email us, Mary Jo at Without the Bank, and we will add you to the cancellation list so that you can get bumped up sooner. Okay, well said. Focus on what you do best and surround yourself with a team to fill in where you have gaps in the knowledge and skill. Yes, Brian, yes. I have a young man that I have not answered. Kyle, I'm a college student in agriculture. What advice do you have to share? My advice to you, Kyle, is if you're going to have an off the farm job, save the money for the farm. Get started slowly. There's a lot of questions I have for you. Does your folks farm? Are you trying to start on your own? What kind of agriculture are you trying to get into? All that good stuff. And so I think that Steve said, Kyle, can you be more specific? So yeah, Steve is on the same track as I am. And so that just be smart about your money. At the end of the day, manage your finances. Run your business like a business. If you're not running it like a business, don't expect it to be successful. Don't expect it to be a business. It's going to always be a hobby, right? It's a business. You have to know your numbers. And I know it sucks, but you have to do it. You have to. There's no other way. Look at what happened to the dairy. Turned them around because they paid attention. I had a guy today that, and I have quite a few guys, and Steve, if you guys have questions, Steve is doing this. I know that for a fact. Brian, I'm not sure if I remember if you're doing it or not, but planting cover crops, running your cows on those cover crops so you don't have the winter hay. One of the ladies I talked to this week said, oh, we're doing that. And the neighbors are driving by looking to see if we're still feeding hay or if we're feeding hay. And they're not feeding any hay. So what are they doing? They're haying it and selling it to the guys that aren't planting cover crops. They're saving money. The neighbors are going to think you have lost it and you're going to fall off your rocker. But guess what? Are they trying anything different or are they just sitting back saying, well, this doesn't work? Right? Steve and I talk about that all the time. Steve is a great resource for those of you that want to do something a little bit different in agriculture. Message him privately and hit him up on it. But it is, do look at what's happening and take a little bit of risk and plant a cover crop. Like, I don't know how much risk that is. It doesn't sound like a whole lot to me, right? Run the cows in it. But they live in an environment where it snows and it gets really cold and they're having to feed hay, but they're selling it, right? And again, they knew their numbers and they knew what was making a profit. And so they were profitable. And so on the spectrum, what do I have? People that are not, we can't get stuff started, but we know where to begin then. And then we have people that can. And because they're paying attention to their numbers and they've been looking at stuff and all that good stuff. Steve is nuts. Brian, yep, cover crops at 7 inches tall. Also do corn stalks till December, then feed silage. Yes, I knew you did, Brian. Okay, so between Brian and Steve, you guys should have a great, Tim, you should be able to get all the information that you want. Hello, by the way, Tim. So those of you that listen to the podcast, Tim was on the podcast. So you can say hi to Tim. He's like a semi-celebrity, right? You are booked until November. Only one available in October currently. Thank you. I didn't know that. So I apologize you guys have to wait so long. Cereal, rye, turnips, mows. Okay. I don't plant cover crops. So I'm going to let you boys have that conversation on my Facebook page. Keep it up. I will definitely read those because I do read them and pay attention to them. Go to Farming Without the Bank, grab the book if you haven't, share the book if you haven't, share this video if you want. Whatever, I appreciate you all. Thank you very much for letting me be late and not beating me up. Have a good night.